They packed up my room while I was at work. My childhood drawings, my books, my bed, all stuffed into trash bags, dumped in the garage. It's just for a while, my mother said, but then they changed the locks. My room became my cousin's art studio, and I became expendable. Have you ever been erased from your own life, forgotten by the very people you lived for? I left with a suitcase and a silent scream. 1 year later, I came back, not for revenge, but for reckoning. And what I uncovered shattered far more than family ties. I wasn't supposed to hear them. It was close to midnight, and I'd come down for water when I caught the faint murmurs coming from the kitchen. My parents, backs turned to me, didn't notice I was standing by the staircase. If Dylan has that room, we could increase the home appraisal by 20%. My mother whispered, her voice low and calculating. It's just sitting there unused now. My father grunted. She's barely home anyway. What's she gonna do with it? I froze. My room? The one I had slept in since I was 5? I stepped back into the shadows, heart pounding. I wanted to believe I misunderstood. Surely they couldn't be serious. The next morning, my mother smiled at me over breakfast. "Honey, can we talk about something?" she began, stirring her tea with exaggerated calm. "Would you mind clearing out your room for a bit? Just temporary, of course. Dylan needs some space to work on his portfolio. You know how hard he's trying to get into that gallery." I laughed, unsure. My room? For Dylan? Her eyes didn't blink. "Just for a little while," I nodded, because what else could I do? It didn't sound like a request, and besides, I trusted her. She was my mother. That afternoon, I started packing a few things, just essentials. I told myself it was fine. Families help each other. Dylan was family. He just needed a little help, and I happened to have a room. It wasn't a big deal, but something about the way they avoided eye contact, how my father pretended to be immersed in the newspaper, made me uneasy. Still, I smiled. I reassured them. I even joked about finally needing to grow up and live like a proper adult. They nodded, relieved. We all lied to each other that day. A week later, I came home after work, and my key didn't fit the front door. I jiggled it again, thinking maybe I'd grabbed the wrong one. But no, the lock had been changed. Confused, I rang the bell. Dylan opened the door, paint on his hands, a smudge across his cheek. "Hey," he said casually, stepping aside. "You coming in?" I walked in slowly. Something felt off. The house smelled different. Paint, turpentine, something artificial. I made my way to my old room and stopped cold. It wasn't mine anymore. The walls had been painted white, clean and stark. My posters, my bookshelf, the tiny fairy lights I'd strung around the mirror, gone. An easel stood in the middle, surrounded by canvases and jars of brushes. My bed had been replaced by a low couch splattered with ink. It looked like a showroom. It looked like erasure. "Where are my things?" I asked. "Oh," Dylan said, scratching his head. "Aunt Linda packed them. I think they're in the garage." I opened the garage door and was hit by the musty smell of damp cardboard. My belongings, photo albums, old journals, the stuffed bear Dad gave me when I was 7, were stacked in a corner, some boxes sagging from the rain. A few items had fallen out and were lying on the concrete floor. One of my drawings from high school had tire marks across it. My mother found me standing there. "You weren't using it anymore," she said lightly. "Don't be dramatic." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" My voice shook. "It was just easier this way. You're always busy. We figured it was time." Time for what? For me to disappear? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. not in front of her. I picked up the wet box, careful not to let it fall apart. My fingers were numb, but not from the cold. Later that night, alone in the small guest room I was temporarily allowed to stay in, I pulled out a framed photo from one of the boxes. It was of me and Dad the day I got into college. He had hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Back then, he'd called me his pride and joy. That same man hadn't looked up from his phone when I walked through the door tonight. I clutched the frame to my chest and let the tears come quietly. This was grief, not for a person, but for a place that no longer remembered me. Have you ever stood in a house full of people you love and realized not a single one was on your side? I thought that was betrayal, but I was wrong. This was just the beginning. The envelope was pale blue, embossed with gold foil and tied with a white satin ribbon. Elegant, impersonal. It had been slipped under my apartment door by a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. Her note was brief. "You weren't on the list, but I thought you should know." It was a wedding invitation. Dylan and his fiancée were getting married at my parents' house, my old house. The date was bold and bright, 2 weeks from today. I flipped the card over again and again, searching for my name. Nothing. I wasn't a guest. I was a ghost. Even the RSVP was pre-filled for someone else. That night, I sat in silence scrolling through social media. There it was, my old room, now bathed in soft natural light and surrounded by floating candles, framed by a caption that read, "Where the love began, the space that inspired Dylan's greatest work." Thousands of likes, comments calling it magical. One even said, "It's amazing how his family always believed in him." I laughed, not the kind of laugh that came from humor, but the kind that bubbled up from disbelief and landed somewhere near heartbreak. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and stared at the reflection I'd been avoiding for months. My hair was long, still the same soft brown my mother used to braid when I was a child. I picked up the scissors and cut. No hesitation, no tears. When I was done, I swept the hair into a bag and threw it in the trash. A part of me went with it, and I didn't want it back. A few days later, I was sorting through old tax documents and banking records, trying to piece together my finances when something caught my eye. An account, joint with my mother, opened when I was in high school, was almost empty. I blinked. It had held over $25,000 the last time I checked. Money I had earned, saved, deposited slowly from years of freelance work. It was supposed to be for grad school, for moving someday, for safety. Now it was down to $82. I printed the transaction history, my hands trembling. The withdrawals had started around the same time I left the house. They weren't small, they were strategic, they were surgical. I dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetie, I didn't waste time. You emptied my account." She didn't pause. "Yes, Dylan needed capital for his gallery submission. We agreed that family comes first." "No," I said, my voice flat. "We didn't agree. You took it." "It's not stealing," she replied. "It's reallocating. You weren't using it. Dylan will pay it back. He's family. You need to stop being selfish." There was a pause. I realized I was holding my breath. "I trusted you," I whispered. "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. That money was just sitting there." The call ended without goodbye. I went to the bank the next morning to see if anything could be done. It couldn't. The joint status meant she had full legal access. I sat across from the teller, a young woman with a soft voice and sympathetic eyes. She saw the printout in my hands, the way my fingers clutched it. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded but didn't speak. Because what was there to say? That your own mother robbed you with a smile? That the people you once bought birthday cakes for now act like you don't exist? That your dreams were sold to fund someone else's lies? On the way home, I threw the banking papers into the passenger seat and turned on the radio. A voice cut through the static, and we're joined today by emerging artist Dylan Monroe, whose emotionally raw pieces have captured the hearts of the art world. I pulled over. The interview was live. Dylan was speaking about inspiration, about his incredibly supportive family, about the moment his aunt, my mother, believed in him more than anyone else ever had. She saw something in me before I even saw it in myself. That was the line. I shut the radio off and sat in silence. The line between victim and fool had always been thin, but in that moment, it vanished completely. At home, I stared at the wall, the silence thick. Then I opened my phone and deleted every photo of her. The birthday calls, the hospital visits, the note she used to leave in my lunchbox, gone. And then I changed her contact name from Mom to Linda. That was the day I stopped calling her my mother. The first thing I did was download everything: bank records, old emails, shared photo albums, text messages, voicemails. I fed them into a basic AI program I'd once used for client data analysis. It sorted everything by date, keywords, sentiment. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. But then patterns began to emerge. Withdrawals from my account matched dates when Dylan posted new artwork. My mother's text history showed late-night messages to an art gallery director, oddly formal, laced with flattery and promises. Then came the names. The gallery Dylan was showing at, Brenton Arts Collective, was being quietly investigated by federal agents for possible money laundering. I found the thread buried in an online art forum, posted by a whistleblower under a pseudonym. A comment caught my eye. Emerging artists with sudden cash flow? Follow the fake sales. Follow the family ties. My stomach dropped. I opened Dylan's portfolio again, something I had once scrolled past out of habit. This time I looked closely. 2 pieces jumped out at me, not for their brilliance, but for their familiarity. They were mine. I had painted them when I was 13. One during a rainy summer I spent grounded, the other as a therapy assignment. They were raw, clumsy, and deeply personal. I recognized every brush stroke. He had scanned them, altered the signature, and presented them as his own. The titles were different, but the pain in the lines, that was mine, and no one knew. I didn't just lose my room, I whispered aloud. I lost my history. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain hummed with rage and clarity. If they could rewrite my life, I could rewrite the ending. I reached out to Mara, a girl I hadn't spoken to since high school. She'd gone into art curation and, last I heard, worked briefly for Brenton. Her reply came quickly, a yes to coffee, a quiet curiosity in her tone. We met at a small cafe near downtown, the kind with steamed-up windows and cinnamon-heavy air. She arrived before me, nervous but open. "I thought you'd never reach out," she said. I didn't know how to say I'd been ashamed, that I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. That betrayal often makes you question your own reality. I showed her the pictures, my childhood art, Dylan's copies. Mara didn't speak for a full minute. Then she pulled out her phone and scrolled through old gallery emails. "Yeah," she murmured, turning the screen. This one sold for $3,000. Brenton hyped it as trauma-born expressionism. My trauma, his profit. I closed my eyes. They never asked questions, Mara continued. As long as it sold, they didn't care. But the gallery's been under pressure. They're trying to clean house quietly. If this gets out now... I didn't need her to finish. Timing was everything. Later that week, I met with a lawyer specializing in family assets and inheritance law. He listened carefully, leafing through the documents I'd printed and organized into a neat binder. When I showed him the home deed, he stopped. "This signature," he said, tapping the page. "It's dated when you were 17. That's below the legal age for contractual consent. In this state unless fully emancipated." I hadn't been. "She told me it was just paperwork for school registration," I said. He nodded grimly. "If we can prove coercion or misinformation, you may have partial legal claim to the property." Everything was unraveling, but for once, it was in my favor. The final puzzle piece came from someone I never expected. My uncle, my mother's younger brother. He had always been distant, borderline invisible, during family gatherings, but when I reached out, he responded with surprising speed. "I know what she did," he said over coffee, eyes tired. "I never said anything because it wasn't my fight, but I should have." He handed me a flash drive. "This has records, emails, voicemails. She didn't just cut you out. She built a narrative that you were unstable, unreliable. She wanted Dylan to be the legacy, not you." I asked why he was giving this to me now. "Because I have a daughter," he said quietly. "And if anyone ever did to her what Linda did to you, I'd want her to have everything she needs to fight back." That night, I sat alone in the same cafe I had once visited with my father when I was a kid. He used to take me there after dentist appointments, bribing me with hot chocolate and silence. It was the last place I remembered feeling safe. I looked out the window, steam clouding the glass, and exhaled. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. I wasn't going home to make peace. I was going home to take my name back. They chose a Sunday in early spring. A garden wedding, lush with pastel roses, silk-draped arches, and candle-lit lanterns dangling from trees. It was all so perfectly curated, for Instagram, for appearances, for everything my family worshipped more than truth. I stood outside the gate, heels planted on stone, a soft breeze brushing against the neckline of the black satin dress I had picked for this moment. Not white, not red, just enough elegance to be remembered, just enough darkness to be undeniable. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. I walked in. The usher, a college student likely paid minimum wage, stared at me like I didn't belong. He didn't stop me. No one did. My face was still familiar enough to make them hesitate, and unfamiliar enough to make them uncomfortable. I reached the main aisle just as the officiant was clearing his throat. Dylan stood tall, smug in a cream suit, flanked by family who smiled like their world was untouchable. My mother sat in the front row, her expressions set in that polite coldness reserved for waiting room strangers. She saw me, and for a split second her mouth twitched, but she didn't speak. "I'd like to say something," I said, stepping forward. The microphone was in the officiant's hand. He hesitated. "I'm the bride's cousin," I added. Technically true. The silence was exquisite. I took the mic, pulled the USB from my purse, and plugged it into the event projector that was being used for their wedding montage. The screen behind the altar flickered, then shifted. My voice came first. "I'm Jenna Monroe, I used to live here, right there. I pointed toward the side wing of the house, in the room that now belongs to the groom. Slide 1, a photo of my old bedroom, fairy lights, a shelf of books, art supplies in the corner. Slide 2, the studio it became, sterile white walls, stolen space. Slide 3, my bank statement, date, amount, withdrawal. Slide 4, the renovation invoice, paid in full from the joint account my mother drained. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. My mother stood. "Jenna, this isn't the time." "No," I said calmly. "This is the perfect time, since we're all here celebrating family." Then came the art comparison, side-by-side images, my childhood paintings, dated and signed in the corner. Then Dylan's gallery exhibits, clearly traced, slightly altered, fraudulently branded. The final slide, a screenshot from Pinterest, time-stamped 2 years ago. The same image Dylan had used for his wedding gift to the groom. A near-exact replica. Gasps, real ones. Not the kind people fake at surprises, but the kind that come from watching something crack in real time. The groom stepped back. "Is this true?" he asked Dylan. Dylan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Then the groom pulled the framed painting from the gift table and dropped it, glass shattering on the lawn. The officiant looked like he wanted to vanish. I handed the mic back and walked away. They didn't stop me. I left before they could decide how. The video surfaced that evening, shaky cell phone footage uploaded by someone's bored cousin. It spread faster than I anticipated. Within hours, it was trending. Exiled daughter exposes wedding. The hashtags multiplied. A fake artist, a family fraud, she came back. Jenna was right. By morning, TikTok was flooded with reactions. Artists analyzing the plagiarism, lawyers explaining inheritance law, survivors of toxic families telling their own stories. Jenna became a name, not a ghost, not a girl who disappeared. A name with teeth. Emails poured in. An indie publisher offered me a book deal. A podcast wanted an interview. A gallery reached out. Not Dylan's gallery, of course. That one shut down quietly within a week, wiped its Instagram, changed management, and issued a vague internal restructuring statement. My mother emailed. Subject line, "Please." She said she was sorry, that she had made mistakes, that family was complicated, that she never meant for it to go this far. She ended it with, "Jenna, come home, we can fix this." It was the first time she had used my name in over 3 years, but not to love me, to save herself. I didn't respond. I read the message in silence, once, then twice. Then I deleted it. There are apologies that come from shame, and there are those that come from fear. Do you forgive someone when they finally realize you're stronger than them? Or do you remember that the version of you who needed their kindness is already dead? I took a walk that evening, hands deep in my coat pockets, air crisp against my cheeks. People stared at me less now, or maybe I stared back harder. A girl passed me wearing a hoodie that said, "No one can erase me." She smiled, small and knowing. I smiled back. I never sued them. People kept asking, why not press charges? Why not drag them to court and make them pay? But I didn't want a trial. I didn't want to be cross-examined on my own trauma while they painted themselves as misunderstood parents and struggling artists. I didn't need a courtroom. I needed truth to echo where lies once lived. So I gave everything I had to the IRS, to the local authorities, to a small investigative journalist group that specialized in white-collar crime. Receipts, emails, voice memos, the entire paper trail. It was enough. The investigation began quietly, the way these things often do. An anonymous tip, a question posed to the wrong person, a knock on the right door at the right time. Then the letters arrived, one to my mother, one to Dylan, one to the house. The home I once slept in, the one they gutted and painted white, to make way for someone else's dream, was seized for review. Financial irregularities, possible tax fraud, illegal use of minors' assets. Words that had once seemed distant were now printed in black ink, delivered by people who couldn't be ignored. Neighbors talked, the press hovered. My mother stopped sending emails, my father never did. Until one afternoon, a handwritten letter arrived. No return address, just my name in shaky penmanship. I sat under the maple tree behind my building to read it. The same kind of tree my father and I had planted together when I was 10. The one in our old backyard hadn't survived the renovations. The letter was short. I don't know how to fix what I let happen. I chose silence when I should have chosen you. I believed in keeping peace more than keeping you safe. I failed. I'm sorry. If I could go back. It trailed off into a signature that didn't quite match the one I remembered from birthday cards. It didn't fix anything, but it cracked something open. Not forgiveness, just air, space to breathe. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like screaming. I folded the letter and tucked it inside my sketchbook. That weekend, I drove to the coast, not to run away, not to celebrate, just to sit with myself somewhere no one had spoken my name in years. I brought a canvas, a set of pencils, and one photo of my old bedroom before it became someone else's stage. The waves crashed softly as I began to draw, not perfectly, not even well, but honestly. I sketched the curve of the window, the crooked shelf I built myself, the dent on the far wall, where I once threw a hairbrush in teenage rage. I let the lines be rough, uneven. I didn't fix them. There was healing in the imperfection. The news broke a week later. My mother had reached a private settlement, forced to return assets, liquidate her holdings, and relinquish control of the house. The gallery Dylan worked with issued a formal apology, distancing themselves entirely. His name slipped from headlines, just like that. But I didn't feel victorious. No camera crew followed me home. No confetti fell from the sky. There was no cathartic speech, no soaring soundtrack. Justice didn't feel like a firework. It felt like quiet, like the absence of pressure in your chest, like the silence after a scream, like watching something rot, then realizing you no longer care enough to look away. A month later, I signed over the house, not to keep it, but to transform it. It became the Phoenix Room, a nonprofit creative space for women who had been exiled from their families, displaced from their homes, silenced by those who should have protected them. The rooms were redone, not white and sterile, but full of color, softness, and stories. No one had to ask permission to hang their art. No one's name was erased from the walls. I didn't attend the opening ceremony. It wasn't about me, but I did visit once. Quietly, unannounced. I watched a girl about 19 sketching in the corner of what used to be my bedroom. She looked focused, free. She had no idea who I was. That was perfect. She didn't need to know me to be safe here. That night, I walked past the front door, just once. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. You see, I didn't come this far for an apology. I didn't fight for closure, wrapped in a bow, or a tearful reunion at the doorstep. I fought for the right to exist without permission. for the right to be forgotten by people who once pretended to love me, and now I had it. You ever forgive someone, not with words, not with acceptance, but by simply refusing to carry their weight anymore? By letting them shrink to their true size, and while you keep growing? That's what peace really is. I don't need them to say they're sorry. I need me to be free. I didn't change my number, but I stopped answering calls that came from my hometown area code. I didn't block anyone. I didn't post statements online. I just faded out, the way people do when they realize they've outgrown a life that once defined them. I moved to a different city, rented a small apartment with lots of natural light and zero family history. I left no forwarding address. My name at work became J. Monroe. No first name, no familiarity. Just enough of a wall to remind me I was in charge of who got in. I made lists of what I allowed, what I accepted, what I no longer excused. I skipped holidays without explanation. Declined invitations to family reunions I knew were more about reputation than reconnection. I became the quiet person in the back of the room who knew exactly where the exits were. But I didn't isolate. Instead, I started something new. On a whim, I went live one night on a private Instagram account I'd created under a pseudonym. No face, just hands, mine, sketching a scene from memory. A crooked shelf, a crooked smile, a place that used to be home. I spoke softly, telling the story in pieces. Not names, not accusations, just truth. The message box lit up within minutes. Women from different cities, different backgrounds, all with the same story told in 100 ways. They told me I was crazy. They erased me. They made me leave my own house, so I did it again, weekly, then twice a week. A tiny community bloomed, one built on art and survival, not pity. They sent drawings, I sent encouragement. They asked how I stayed strong. I told them I didn't, I just stayed standing. There was no climax, no big finale, just new rituals, making tea at dusk, locking my front door, not apologizing when I said no. That was my fortress. And one morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about them in days. That was peace. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was continuation. I returned to the house quietly, with no one watching. The Phoenix room, now vibrant and alive, sat nestled in the neighborhood like it had always belonged. Inside, the walls were covered with artwork, some beautiful, some raw, some unfinished. It didn't matter. They were real. In what used to be my bedroom, now converted into a shared studio, a girl with short purple hair was painting. She didn't look up when I entered. She was focused, headphones in, lost in her world. A notebook sat beside her, filled with tiny, angry poems. I didn't disturb her, I just watched. Another woman passed me in the hallway, mid-30s maybe. She smiled. "You're Jenna, right?" I nodded. "My daughter's here because of you." I didn't know what to say, so I smiled back. Out in the courtyard, a younger girl, maybe 19, approached me cautiously. She was holding a sketchbook tight to her chest, like it might fly away. "I heard you used to live here," she said. I did. "Do you ever regret losing it, everything?" I looked at her, really looked, and I thought about every sleepless night, every humiliation, every time I wanted to disappear. "No," I said, "because if I hadn't lost that room, I never would have found all of this." She didn't say anything, but she opened her sketchbook and showed me a drawing of a house with a garden lit up with lanterns. It looked a lot like the one I walked away from. I stepped into the last room before I left, the one with the window facing east. Morning light streamed in exactly like it used to, hitting the corner where my old easel once stood. The space was empty now, save for one stool and a small vase of sunflowers. I didn't cry, I smiled. Because this wasn't the end. This was full circle.